Namaste. Yes, so the second video for June, and we're focusing this month on, the connection between karma and astrology. So let me just try to get this PowerPoint up, share the screen. Okay, let's maximize that. The law of karma, or the law of causation, is really all it is. Things that we don't necessarily want to look at, but that's the reason why we're here, to look at life and our personality and our responses to life and circumstances, and try to do something about it consciously. And for that, we need a technique, which is yoga, of course. It's a technique. It's not the only technique, but it's a very powerful technique. And as I was taught, it's not necessarily the fastest route to self-enlightenment, but it's a darn sure end result if you just keep putting one foot in front of the other, working through the system, working through the self-awareness, self-discipline, and keep reflection, which is the Taka part of it that hopefully you're working on this month, if it's meaningful for you. If it's not, don't worry about it. But really just looking at the way things are. This card is one of my death and dying conversational cards that I created, and this is kind of like many people's reaction to karma. Let me run away from it. Let me just run away from it. It is as it is. I can't change anything. I can't do anything about it. And to the mystic, we just want to stand still, asana symbolically, and just start to look at the writing on the wall, the way things are going to pan out, and try to make some conscious changes. If you don't believe in reincarnation, I think it's very, very difficult. For the Christians, it should be very easy. I mean, there was the resurrection, wasn't there? It's just that for whatever reason, the priests wanting perhaps most of the power, thinking that they know the way to God and you don't have that power yourself individually. It was just Jesus that could do that, and not you. But for the yogi, the mystic, it's something that everyone can emulate. We're trying to emulate that which is a symbol of unification. So reincarnation and karma are intimately linked, and my dad doesn't believe in it. I know my older son doesn't. The younger one is probably very skeptical about it. It's very difficult if you don't have that belief that there's reincarnation. But there are many avenues that you can go along to look at that and challenge that belief system. And for example, looking at people like Mozart, who were geniuses at 5 years old. How can that happen? I mean, really, how can that happen? At 5 years old, you're composing concertos and stuff, and it's the memories go on. And as I've said before, what we're doing now in this lifetime is not that far from what we've been doing in previous lifetimes. And if that's all well and good and everything is great and rosy in your garden, fantastic, keep doing what you're doing. You're doing the right thing. But if things are not going quite so right for you and you're feeling anguish and stress, maybe there's something that you can do. There is something that you can do, but you have to come to that realization for yourself. So anyway, reincarnation and karma are intimately linked. What is karma? It's gravity, basically. We put a word out there when we were looking at the the system of yoga. We were talking about causation in terms of what we think usually becomes what we say. We start talking about it, which is, there's a lot of conversation going on right now about certain things, and that's good because that's going to bring about change and manifestation. So it's subtle, super subtle, and then gross. You're thinking about it at a more subtle stage of things. You're communicating way, you're discussing it, you're chewing upon ideas. That's a little bit more gross. And then, of course, the action takes place, and that is the that gravitational force. We all know that. We have a body, and gravity is going to do a number. We're shorter in the morning, shorter in the evening than we are at the beginning of the day. So it's that pressure, which is why I love being in the water so much, because we have an opportunity to go in and up and find that visceral length once again. But karma, really more than anything, is gravity. If we're my sister can probably relate to this actually. If your car is parked at the top of the hill, you've left the brake off. Maybe if things aren't, you know, quite tickety-boo, the car is going to start sliding down the road. Now, if you notice, oh, bugger, I didn't put the handbrake on when I left the car, you run back quickly, you run in, open the door, put the handbrake on, nothing happens. You take time, you don't do anything about it. What happens? The momentum starts to increase, and then of course it ends up with a collision at the bottom of the hill. So karma, more than anything, is just responding to this gravitational field that we live in on the earth realm. Maybe we all need to be astronauts, which is kind of what we do when we meditate, I think, anyway. But anyway, karma is, Korean under used to teach us, karma is a proclivity. And some of you might have pulled off your natal chart right now, and some of you perhaps are going, oh my goodness, yes, that's me. Yes, I do have that kind of tendency to be like that. Whether it's harmonious or inharmonious doesn't really matter. It's just you recognize things in yourself. You have a proclivity to do something in a certain way. You know, the Leo is always going to have a proclivity to want to take center stage. We see that with people in the public eye too. Karma is also a blind spot. Unless we wake up, that's that whole process of yoga. We're trying to move Kundalini. Remember, it's a sleeping serpent. In the majority of human beings, their life is confined to the first 3 chakras, which are linked psychologically in an imbalanced way or a challenging way to fear, greed, and anger. Fear at the root chakra, that's linked to Saturn. It's linked to the bones of the body as well. Greed, which is the 2nd chakra, it's a water element linked to the pelvis. It's creation, creativity, those kinds of things. And fear at the navel center, that's linked to Mars. That could be on one side, rogue on the road, on the other side could be knight in shining armor. So we need those kinds of energies. We need to be able to confine that which is out of control in our life, in the same way that we need to expand in areas that we need to expand in, but too much expansion can turn into us being, you know, lots of issues like overeating, over drinking, all those kinds of things. And then of course you have that margin element as well, that needs to be directed in the right way to wherever we need to create fire in our life. And of course, initially, because we're just a stomach on 2 legs, it's going to be creating that digestive fire to be able to process the food that we eat, whatever we put in. It depends. If we can't manage it in our system, then it's going to create ama, which is a toxin in the body. And karma is also desire, which we all have, you know, wanting to, remember we're a baby and we kind of want to explore things, and we're attuned, we're attracted, that law of attraction, we're attracted to things as well. So karma is also desire. Now, this is a picture of what a natal chart looks like. Lots of lines going here, there, and everywhere. Your sun sign is your sun sign. Your ascendant is always going to be here on the horizon, on the left-hand side. And then the houses go this way around in one of your sheets of paper. We'll go through this in perhaps a little bit more in the next video, but basically it's little apple pie segments, 12 of them, 12 houses, 12 mansions of your soul, which you might remember when we were looking at chakras. I think that was seems like a long time ago. It was in March. We were looking at kleshas, koshas, and chakras. We're looking at the energetic centers in the body that you remember are linked to states of consciousness. And I think on the previous video, the first video for June, you probably, I think you had a picture of someone sitting down with the chakric centers, and I told you the planetary or the zodiac signs that are within us and associated to chakras. So the planets move, obviously, like the moon moves, and has an effect upon us, because this is a map. The natal chart is a map of our configuration, our potential relationship with the other planets within and without, as above, so below, the Hermetic axiom. We're just a mirror of what's going on up here. We all have, when we're born, we have this carbon copy of planets and aspects within planets. And because the planets are within us, we also, when the planets move and progress in the sky, it has a resonance with us as well in our planetary system. We have a relationship with different people. They have a planetary configuration that triggers something within us as we trigger something within them. So there's this relationship between people based on what we perceive. We're still just functioning on the tunnel that we have, the glasses that we have on, tunnel vision. And the idea is to step outside of the zodiac, step outside of the karmic proclivity, and become more self-aware. 12 signs of the zodiac, what we're trying to do is to become the anointed one, to become the wise one, and recognize that all the chakras, all the planetary forces that are compelling us to do something, to act in a certain way, to think in a certain way, are just a proclivity. And if we're self-aware, we can step back, we can pause, which is the value of meditation. We can pause and think, isn't that interesting? I recognize that's what I want to say. I recognize that's what I want to do, but I'm not going to do it. And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's not very easy. But when you know the right thing to do, you know the right thing to do, and you stick to your guns and you kind of stay with that, and you're changed, you're transformed forever. And nothing will be the same. You won't have the same tendencies to fall back and make the same mistakes again, and we all make them. So your natal chart will allow you to see the tendency of your personality. You've probably seen that with your sun sign, which most people know, the moon sign, that will give an idea about your emotionality, your inner self, and then also the planet that's ascending at the time of your birth, which may give you a deeper insight actually into how you really feel. Because sometimes we do things, sometimes people see a personality and they say, oh yeah, isn't that interesting? That's a Taurus, that's a Gemini, or whatever, that's their trait. But then there's that deep subliminal side of them as well. They also have the pressure of the planet that's on ascension at the time of their birth. And very often that can be something that's hidden. You don't necessarily see that unless, of course, you dig deeper into their psyche through astrology. So it will tend to tell us these lines are relationships between the houses, the areas of our life, whether it's first house, sense of self, seventh house, sense, the house of marriage, or self-confinement. And so we have these relationships between the planets at the time of our birth. And some are harmonious, some are powerful, and some are inharmonious. And if you have a lot of squares, which are typically the inharmonious ones, it's just an opportunity to learn and to grow, that's all. If you have trines and sextiles, which are like a sort of asterisk thing, then you may have a lot of easy, life's easy, life's just, bed of roses and stuff. But don't bank on that happening for the rest of eternity. If things are going well, that's wonderful, but the work still needs to be done. Inharmonious, harmonious tendencies will take place. But remember, the tendencies are only the proclivities to do something. You can change the outcome if you're aware of it, number one, and number two, if you have a technique to overcome that tendency. It just means, Korean Under used to say, you've got to get up get up really early, put your backpack on, have all your tools and things in the backpack, and then march on. If you're in Aries, you're probably going to think, oh yeah, that's what I need to do, and march and go up the hill, and then halfway up you realize you haven't bought your bottle of water, and you haven't got a decent pair of shoes, you haven't got a hat on and it's blazing hot, those kinds of things. If you're a Gemini, you might start up the hill and then you think, oh no, this is too much, start walking back, then you feel guilty, oh no, let's go back again, that indecision, those kinds of things. So we have all of those planetary forces within us, but just a few of them that tend to become a little bit more obvious to ourselves and to other people. There is nothing either good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. Shakespeare, Hamlet. He was quite a mystic, I think, really. There is nothing good or bad. There is no good or bad karma. There's just karma, and our ability or inability to react or respond accordingly, rather than to just react. Someone pushes our buttons and we explode. And then it's just going to keep happening until there'll be a time when that doesn't happen anymore. And the person that pushes the buttons, causes that trigger, will go and pick on someone else, or they'll just feel they'll change, their life will change. And so we affect people by the way that we live and the way that we respond to life. It's not easy. Of course, it's not easy. The mystic often looks to nature for answers. There's a time to be born. You see a big oak tree. It's beautiful, magnificent. The leaves die, fall back into the ground. The tree seemingly looks like it's dead. And then all of a sudden, it comes back again. There's a regeneration. And so it's another time. It's another opportunity to grow. And for some people, life can be too much. And so, you say, well, suicide is a way out, but when people commit suicide, they're no longer in any pain at all. It's instantaneous that they're out of that pain. The problem is they're going to have to come back and revisit that. And I guess for the mystic, you'd say, well, let's try to do the work now, because it's in the now. Remember the first, Artha, now is the time, first sutra in book 1, Patanjali. Now is the time to work diligently on our self-awareness. So if we're aware of a system, if we're aware of techniques, now is the time to address it. Otherwise, we're going to have to come back and work at that again. So, yeah. And think of it as an emotional protection system. I mean, you imagine living forever, and not having a respite at all. It's too much. It's too much information for us to have. There is a time to live, and there is a time to rest and to take stock, and then to come back again. The problem is, of course, all is but a remembering, and we forget. There's a trade-off in mummy's womb, oxytocin for self-awareness. So we come back and we forget what it is that we're looking for, what it is that we're seeking. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the battle is within chapter 1. Starts off with the conversation really between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, who's on the battlefield of Dharma Kushetra, Kuru Kushetra, on the battlefield of my life, basically. And that's what he's doing. I really like this translation. This book is falling apart now. The Bhagavad Gita, as I think I've told some of you, I had got past the Bhagavad Gita when I was a teenager in my hometown when I was shopping, and kept it and then read it for years. tried to pick it up and read it. It made no sense to me. It didn't seem relevant at all to yoga or anything. And stupidly, I've since learned that it's very relevant, actually. And this translation is by Goswami Kriyananda. It's a poetic one, and I think in the first March, whenever it was, I chanted the second chapter, which is the one that Mahatma Gandhi really liked. But anyhow, the battle is within. So that's how it kind of starts on the battlefield. With it starts off with. Hold on, let me just get this here. There's a blind king who's really asking what's going on. He knows that there's a battle taking place, tons of people, lots of noise, lots of kettle drums and stuff. And he's saying, well, on the field of duty, on the field of desire, assembled, ready to resolve who is final sire. My 100 sons, these are the sons of the blind king, and my 100 sons and the 5 sons of Pandu. What did they do? What did they do? So he's inquisitive. What happened on this battlefield? And Sanjaya answered, O king, your son Duryodhana, seeing the Pandu determined never for peace to sue, went then to his teacher Drona to see the mighty force of the great army. So there's this huge tension building. This is us when we're dealing with life, this huge tension building in our life. A little bit further on, here are the heroes of old. Here are the heroes of old. So he's on the battlefield. Arjuna's on the battlefield talking to Krishna, and he's confronted with people that he knows, teachers, family members, people that he likes, people that he doesn't like. And he's looking, and there's this call for war, and he doesn't know what the hell it's all about. He's thinking, my God, I don't want to go there. What the hell's going on? So, but here, all of the names of the warriors are personality traits that we can kind of understand, proclivities, if you like. Here are the heroes of old, strength and mind, we are told. Warriors like success and protection too, even the greatness of the vehicle true. There are also powerful warriors like prosperity and calmness, purity and double victory then, and valor, bull among men. There is mighty courage and powerful glory, the son of honor and the 5 sons of faith. Together they capture their competitors, for all are great and powerful warriors, and our own distinguished men, power-born, taught by you and the best of the twice-born. Who are these leaders of our host, qualified to lead my army foremost? They include you, anger and attachment for sure, pity, death, and cruelty to lure, and falsehood, the son of sense enjoyment, is always victorious in the battle over the poor. Many other heroes, well equipped for life, come prepared to sacrifice for my cause. All are experienced in military strife. They stand ready, yet paused. The conch shells, the kettle drums, followed by the cymbals and cow horns, all suddenly sounded and resounded. Their combined clamour everywhere abounded. On the other side, the intellect and the mind stood in their great chariot, drawn by horses white, blew their wondrous conch shells of cosmic insight, signing the enemy's destiny that very night. The enemy is his mind, of course, as the enemy is our mind. Lord Krishna blew his conch called meditation. Arjuna, winner of wealth, blew his conch, devotion. And strength, accomplisher of deeds of non-emotion, blew his conch called austerity, in motion. So even early on in chapter 1, when there's this battle going on, or the precipice of a battle, that Arjuna has to be the one to wield the sword, and the sword is cutting through his own personality traits, if you like, chop, 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 chop. Non-emotion, devotion, and meditation. And at some point Arjuna says, oh, just tell me how it is. Just tell me it all. What is life all about? And, I know that you've lived many, many lifetimes, thousands and thousands of lifetimes. The Buddha, by the way, was 350,000 incarnations before he came enlightened, so we can expect to be here for a little bit longer. But Arjuna says to Lord Krishna, "Oh, just tell me as it is in an instant." And Lord Krishna goes, "I don't think you want to see that." And he goes, I do, just tell me it as it is." And he goes, "Okay, so now you're going to remember all your lives and all those emotions and everything that happened to you in an instant." And he goes, "Yeah, that's great, that'd be fantastic." He does it and he goes, "Oh, no, take it back again, I don't want to know, it's too much." And that kind of begs the question about, losing consciousness or falling into unawareness, which is pretty much what we do when we fall asleep. But the mind is still minding, and so there's still an effect happening in our universe, which is the value of falling asleep slowly, and processing things that you can rationally do in the waking hours, with so that you can kind of feel good about yourself. You've done as much as you possibly can, and then you fall asleep, and hopefully that process of just letting go, you'll wake up in the morning feeling refreshed, as opposed to you're rushing around chasing your tail all day, you're watching violent things on the TV, playing games and those kinds of things. Your mind is rushing and ranting, and then you try to fall asleep, but you can't. Your mind hasn't slowed down. It hasn't processed that series, or that process of the moon, honoring the cycle of the moon, which is to slow down, turn off the lights, play gentle music, deep breathing, maybe reading a nice inspirational book, meditation, gentle yoga, yoga nidra, restorative yoga, those kinds of things, so that you can fall asleep and you really get into that deep state where you can refresh the body rather than the mind minding. Oops, wrong way. So all is but a remembering. When we're a baby, obviously we're trying to crawl and get up as soon as we can, and we kind of fall down. And what do? We have to get up again and move on until eventually we can stand up. And that's what we're trying to do with the situations that we have, and we tend to keep going through over and over and over and over again until we find a way out of that situation. We might have to move to a different country. We might have to move away from a certain situation, a relationship or something. But nevertheless, we learn and we move on. That's kind of how we learn. Sometimes there's a little bit of a bumpy process though, and need a few band-aids in the meantime. So yes, sleep is an important factor to allow us to process experiences and emotions. And I know some of you are practicing yoga nidra, and that's wonderful. It's a great way of really getting into the parasympathetic nervous system and letting go of tension and stress and anxiety and so forth. So yoga nidra is really wonderful, and you can just kind of Google it. There's tons of free classes that you can get on YouTube on yoga nidra. Wonderful, powerful technique. So going back to sort of clarifying or classifying what karma is, or the different types of karma. There's a big vat of for each of us, known as sanchita karma, which is the big vat of lifetimes of karma that will be manifesting in the future. So huge, big vat of karma. For when we're born, what happens is you can think about a jug that's dipped into sanchita karma, and this is known as pralabdha karma, and this is the karma of this lifetime. Everything else in the vat is just settling down there. Now, as we're working through the karma of this lifetime, which you'll be able to see from your natal chart, there's also karma that we're creating in this lifetime with everything that we think, say, and do. And this is known as kriya mana karma. And this karma will go back into the big vat, unless it's, an instantaneous piece of karma. It will go back into the vat, ready for another lifetime. So those are the three primary types of karma. There's a big vat of all the lifetimes of karma to manifest at some point. There's the jug that's pulled out, and that gives us our natal chart, tells us what the karma is, harmonious or inharmonious, the relationship with the planets and so forth. And then we have the karma that we're creating in this lifetime, and that's based on the horizon of our awareness. So that's why we want to become a little bit more aware, so that we can put more of the positive, harmonious karma into the vat, ready for next time. Otherwise, you can imagine things are going to get even stickier. It's going to be less likely that we're going to have a lot of harmonious karma. So if you think about that big vat in terms of balls, red balls and blue balls, let's just say the harmonious balls are the blue ones, the inharmonious ones are the red ones. So if we're doing everything that we can to think good thoughts, speak nice, kind words, and also to do good deeds, then we're going to have more of the blue balls that are going to be going back into Sanchita karma, the big vat. So when the jug goes in next lifetime, the likelihood is there's going to be more harmonious karma, more blue balls than there are red balls. That's kind of how my childish brain kind of works. But the natal chart will indicate those challenges, typical challenges, and the successes. Yeah, so the trines, the triangles, the sextiles, which are like the asterisks, between the houses, between areas in your pie, different areas of your life, will give you an indication. The squares are usually the big challenges. The conjunctions are like two planets colliding. That's like two circles with a line in the middle. That's called a conjunction. That's just very powerful energy. And it could be harmonious or inharmonious. And there are other aspects too, but those are kind of the main ones. The yoga of the karmic field. Again, another chapter in the Bhagavad Gita. Let's just see, these pages are falling out. You remember in the first video, I kind of spoke about Purusha and Prakriti. Purusha being undifferentiated consciousness, God consciousness, if you like. Prakriti being matter, and everything that's not God consciousness is matter, whether it's a thought, whether it's a piece of paper, whether it's an organ in the body, whether it's a word, whatever is Prakriti. It's got matter. And remember, we have different elements. We have earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And everything is a conglomeration of those elements. A little bit more unctuous when we're little, tends to be a little bit drier when we get older. That's one way of looking at it, but there's other factors too, of course. So what is the difference between spirit and matter? Between the field and its holy knower, between knowledge and that which is known, between the sower and that which is sown. Arjuna, this body and nature are called the field because seeds of action are sown therein. That which sees what the harvest field yields is called sages by the knower of the field. So we're looking for wisdom to know what our field is, what's happening with the planets inside our body, how we can till the garden. That's what Kriyananda used to talk about a lot, tilling your garden. The field is now succinctly described: desire, aversion, pleasure, pain, and pride. Awareness, perception, and their continuance constitute the field and its substance. Be thou detached from objects of sense. Understand the true nature of providence, of birth, disease, old age, and death, and bring at least to rest your breath. Slow down the breathing. We know that. It's one of the primary disciplines in the yogic system. Arjuna, know that matter and spirit are equally without beginning, which means there's no beginning. There is no birth. There is no death. There's just a continuum. And I remember Kriyananda talking to his mother. He had a very difficult life, I think. And he was talking to his mother, and she was close to death. And she said, "Oh, please tell me, Kriyananda, that I don't have to come back and go through this life again." and he said it was really sad that she just wanted to escape and not come back because she'd had such a difficult life. Arjuna know that matter and spirit are equally without beginning, but the triple strands and all the changes come from matter, which constantly rearranges. So they're talking about the gunas, those energetic strands. Remember, rajas, activity. We have tamas, which is lethargy or emotion, and then we have emotion, meaning no moving, and sattva, which is the balance point, the symbol of bringing the hands together. That soul understands that every action is of nature, that spirit is actionless. So we were taught spirit is blind. No, where does it go? I can't remember how it's now. Hold on. Purusha is lame, and Prakriti is blind. And so symbolically, it's the sun and the moon. And of course, we have a sun and a moon, which are the main planets that affect us in our natal chart. It's a masculine and a feminine aspect that need to come into accord, like the right and the left side of the body that need to come into accord. So that soul understands that every action is of nature, that spirit is actionless, matter performs each act and every deed, independent of the soul's hope or creed. So in spite of us being in a field where we're kind of working in a gravitational field, there is another place, there is another state of consciousness that's functioning through us, of course, and we're supposed to be having a relationship with, that has no name, it has no form. And so going inwards and finding that connection is kind of really quite an important piece in finding inner peace and tranquility. Arjuna, as all is illuminated by a single sun, one spirit illuminates the field and everyone. And so the knower of the field illumines the total spinning wheel. The Isaac says wheels within wheels. We have our karmic wheel, and there's the karmic wheel that happens in relationship with other people around us who kind of trigger our karma. And karma comes primarily through people, animals, and nature. And so that's why a lot of the, you know, the traditional yogis would kind of hide in a cave. But, you know, you're going to get those ants in the cave and mosquitoes and snakes maybe or whatever. So you can't eliminate everything entirely. But, you know, you want to evolve as a human being. Kriyananda would say, live in a city. He lived in Chicago for many years before his wife convinced him to move to Hawaii. And then he spent his last years actually with her in south of France. So not too shabby, but you know, if you're in a city where there's a lot of people, then karma is going to come very, very fast. You're going to kind of have a real growth spurt opportunity if you have a technique to deal with all that, of course. Otherwise, you pull yourself away, you pull away from the world, and you find a nice little cabin somewhere on a beach, which sounds like a good idea to me right now. Anyway, we'll leave it there for now. I don't really much like talking about myself, but I do understand that it's important for some of you to understand. And Mary Lou had asked, but she'd asked about, you know, my journey. How did I start? Well, when I was quite young, I suppose, I got exposure to yoga. My mum wanted someone to go to yoga with. It was a local community centre. I was probably 16 or 17. We started doing yoga in a community centre. I think my sister came at that time too. And there were no yoga clothes, no yoga props much. Yoga mats weren't really out there. And Dad pulled off a bit of carpet old bit of carpet, and that was our yoga mat, piece of carpet. We were lucky because we became exposed to the Yoga for Health Foundation, which was a beautiful residential centre in the Bedfordshire countryside in England, and they would do lots of residential yoga for underserved populations, people with cancer, diabetes, people with MS, all those kinds of things. They would come to this beautiful rural setting and practice yoga, and the general public could pop in and drop into these classes. So the classes were very diverse, and in a group of people, it was just do what you can, use whatever props you need, and it was all really geared towards shavasana at the end, which was at least 10 minutes, and people would take sleeping bags and pillows and things, and there was even a big roaring fire in the winter. It was a beautiful old hall with wooden floors and fabulous, and in the summertime the windows would open and there'd be the meadows with the horses neighing in the field, and it was a really special place. It really was. We were so lucky to have had that exposure. A lot of people, especially in America, where this big movement has really come from. I think this new upsurgence of yoga has come from. A lot of people don't have that kind of experience, and so it's been largely asana based, posture based, and getting your right toe and sticking it in your left ear, and that is the definition of a yogi. So we were very lucky. We had that upbringing. I had a corporate job. I was working in the corporate world for many years in oil exploration, and then moved to America when I was my older son was 8 weeks old, and so that was kind of hard for me to leave my family. But it was a great opportunity for me to be a stay-at-home mum, which is what I wanted to be. And so we had a choice. We were going to go to Munich actually originally, but this sounded like a much better idea. And very early on in this area, I became exposed to, there's a lot of different schools that come from or espouse from Paramahansa Yogananda. And wouldn't you know it, I wouldn't go for a local one. And we have several here, schools of thought, but I didn't resonate with them at all. And so when my boys were very young, I kind of came across the Temple of Kriya Yoga in Chicago, where Goswami Kriyananda was the preceptor. And I just kind of knew that I'd found my spiritual grandfather. And so I started studying with him for many years, and went through discipleship, which is a different kind of level of commitment, I suppose, to myself. And then I, graduated as a yoga teacher as well, and I wanted more. I was really spiritually hungry, and probably a little bit greedy in terms of what I wanted to do, what I thought I was going to be accomplishing spiritually. It certainly wasn't being a yoga teacher. I thought it was going to be serving him and the teachings in a different way, opening up a retreat center. But anyway, that didn't happen, and that's just part of it. A lot of it is his karma, of course, as well. Yeah, there was a seminary program that I became. I was really keen on working through, so I joined the seminary, and that's when I got ordained as a priest, essentially a swami, which just means, the literal translation is he or she who knows thyself. That's a load of crap, obviously, because if I did, I wouldn't be here. I'd be up there and I wouldn't come back again. But it just kind of gives you, it gives one a framework of being dedicated, I suppose, to one's spiritual path. It's similar to a priest. You see here, I'm renewing the marriage vows for a couple. That would be something that I could do. I could also do a funeral, officiate a funeral, a baptism, a blessing, baby blessing, those kinds of things, house clearings, spiritual advice, I suppose, really, is kind of one of the things, just like a priest, really, but it's just like a yogic priest. There aren't that many women who become swamis. It's been typically a male-dominated field for many years. But Kriyananda, I think through his last days, he would call the disciples and the swamis, female disciples and swamis in, and he would say, you know, the change is coming, and what I would like you to do is to open your homes and your hearts, especially to women, because the change is coming. We're moving to the matriarchy. Patriarchy hasn't done a very good job. As we know, it's all, you know, money is more important, or a piece of real estate is more important than a human life. And so the change is coming. The Dalai Lama has said it too. The change is coming through the Western woman, and I really believe that that's the case. That's gonna be happening. That's where we're going to see big change in our world. And so it didn't. Nothing pans out the way you think it is. Here is my two little kids when they're young. We're in India. I married an Indian man and thought that it would be wonderful. We'd have a little ashram in India. My kids would be little yogis and all the rest of it. And Siam's the older one. He's, as you can see, he's always had the great body to do the yoga poses. You know, the way that Iyengar and all the big, Hatha yoga teachers would want. So he's always had the ability to be very open in the joints. He would be a great male yoga teacher if he wanted to be, of course. He would be a great example to those. Taran was always, my younger son, the Pisces, he was always the one that used to sneak in the closet. I cleaned out my cupboard, coat cupboard, I think it was, in the house when I was married, and he used to sneak in there in the morning. And, you think that you're going to be able to have control. And one of the things you realize as a parent is you have very little control over your kids. And so as I got deeper and deeper enmeshed in my yoga world, and it wasn't, I was getting a little bit of resistance in the marriage, and that's my fault as well. We divorced and moved to a yoga community. That's where I am up here doing my yoga on the lawn, and that was a great lesson for me, actually, because I recognize that yoga people are just the same as everyone else, and they're all screwed up the same as everyone else is. Just because you live in a yoga community doesn't mean to say that you're any more spiritually evolved than anyone else. So that was a big wake-up call for me, and I lived there for 10 years. Unfortunately, and this was with it was a bit confusing because there were two Kriyanandas that came through the lineage, the Kriya lineage, that goes back as an unbroken line of teachers from a spiritual preceptor known as Babaji. Babaji really meaning the point between the eyebrows. So lots of spiritual masters through the ages. Yogananda is kind of the most one that people most resonate with in the Kriya lineage. He came to America in the 1920s. And one of his disciples was Sri Shelleyji, who lived in Minnesota. He was I used to say he was a little bit of a wizard, small little man. I've got a few pictures of him actually, and met him on the astral a few times. But he was a mystic, a real mystic, and had a very close relationship with Yogananda on that level. When you have disciples and students, they tweak different things out of you. As anyone who's a teacher, some of you are teachers, you already know. The students who ask you the questions are the ones that allow you to remember what it is that you already know. If you have students that don't ask questions, then they're just relying on you to give a dialogue. And it's not the same when you have inquisitive students who are challenging you and asking different things. That's when you start to remember what it is that you've been taught, what it is that you've studied, and you really chew upon the teaching. So students are really a real blessing. Anyway, Shelley initiated Kriyananda. He lived with Shelley and his wife in Minnesota, because Shelley was not a brahmacharya either. Yogananda was. Most of the teachers actually in the lineage have been married, which is a good thing in light of what's been happening with the Me Too movement and lots of scandals in the yoga world with male teachers in the past decade. But Shelley was married, Kriyananda was married, and he was a close disciple of Shelley. And Kriyananda was he was my spiritual grandfather, a very sensible man who didn't demand we did everything. He said, make everyone your teacher. Make everyone your teacher, because you're going to meet more fools than you are sages. So don't wait for you to find a wise person. Learn from everyone. Make everyone your teacher, and you'll be able to grow much faster. So he died. I'm not quite sure. He left his body. I can't remember how many years ago now. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. And so I suppose the light continues. That's the whole purpose of having a living lineage. Yoga is supposed to be an oral tradition. And so the Jyoti is passed on um, from a living state of consciousness. You can't become a disciple from someone who's already dead. And I know there's a lot of people who are different schools in the yoga tradition that say Paramahansa Yogananda is their guru. Did you meet him? Did he initiate you as a disciple? No. Well, he's not really your guru. What he is, you remember, for those of you who would in with me in March, is your Ishta Devata, your chosen form of the divine. And there is a different spiritual connection between a guru and a student that's very mystical and challenging as well. Actually, they challenge you. And so even though he's left his physical body, he's still teaching his students. He's still teaching his students and still working on their karma and helping to soften their karma too. So that's kind of the value of that. But in my journey, this was my mum and dad. They came to the yoga community a couple of times and stayed with me, and they would cook in the kitchen, and everybody loved me cooking in the kitchen, and that's been a big part of what I do. I actually created an online course called Cooking the Yoga Sutras that uses food as a metaphor for teachings, and there's also a little cooking segment in it too, to kind of highlight the spiritual teaching. So I developed that when I was living in the community, which was fun. I've done lots of yoga retreats, taught loads of yoga retreats, especially for women, sort of continuing with that legacy that Kriyananda left us with. And so running retreats and teaching. Sedona Yoga Festival, I've taught at for the past, whatever, 8 years or whatever, until this year, of course, until they had to not do it because of the COVID thing. I developed, pioneered aqua yoga 20 years ago, and this was very new. It wasn't something that came from the yoga world and said, oh, how can we make some money? How can we do something different? I was asked by a director at a YMCA if they thought yoga was possible in the water, and I already knew that it was because I kind of did it by myself, but didn't tell anyone about it or do anything about it. And I started teaching, and people would tell me how fantastic they felt after the first class. They were breathing differently, they felt different in their body, and I still met some resistance with the yoga community who didn't kind of get it at all. If you don't like being in the water, then what can you say? You can say aqua yoga is fantastic until you're blue in the face, but if they don't get it, they don't get it, and so I was just continuing to teach over the years, and then my students said, you have to take this out into the world, where we always wanted this. The only option for us in the water is aerobic stuff, and we don't want to do all that kind of stuff. We want to we want to have this Zen zone. We want to feel we're in control of our body. And so I wrote a book, Aqua Kriya Yoga, and developed a teacher training program, which I've been traveling around the world and teaching in America in particular. And until now, of course, it's all sort of gone pear-shaped. But anyway, doing lots of Zoom classes on aqua yoga, and hopefully I'll be out teaching in the fall, traveling and teaching. But that's kind of my big passion, and running yoga retreats as well is a big passion. At some point, I went into higher seminary, so a few swamis went into higher seminary, and this is where Kriyananda was encouraging us to look at end of life. Oh yeah, I know. And I thought, oh really? You want us to look at end of life? I wasn't particularly enamored with that thought of it. I thought, well, where's the bells and the whistles and the fireworks? I want all of that. But no, he said, I want you to look at end of life and start focusing on that. Spend time in hospice. So I did a little bit of time of that in hospice, and talking about death and dying, and coming to terms with that, which actually was a real blessing, because it is, when we were looking at the kleshas, the last klesha is abhinivesha klesha, clinging to the physical body. Even when we're sick, we don't want to let go because we're frightened we're going to lose everything, or probably we're scared witless about what's going to happen when we meet our maker. Remember, we are the only ones. We are the maker of our own destiny. The mantra is Aham Brahmasmi. I am the creative principle. Aham Brahmasmi, a very, very powerful mantra. And so I did green funeral, home burial training up at Sebastopol with final passages. And this is where I created my death and dying conversational cards. And if any of you are interested, every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, we do a little Zoom chat. There's only a couple of us actually that are interested in doing it. Maybe everyone's busy, I don't know. But there's a couple of us that jump in the Zoom room, and it's on the Good Yogi Death Facebook group, and I post that either Monday or Tuesday, the Zoom link, and you can jump in on the Wednesday. And what we do, I post 2 cards, and all we do is we say, what do you see, what do you feel, and what do you think? And we have this conversation before, you know, the shit hits the fan about death and dying, or change, which is really about what life is. And this is my sister down here. And so Melly's been doing yoga for a long time too, and she has well, I'm like, I've kind of gone east, and she's the western side of me. So she does herbology, and she's a green forest school teacher, and artistic, creative, amazing person. And so we are sort of like, seem like we're 2 halves of the same thing, if you like, really. And yeah, so anyway, that's all I can think of to say about myself. I don't really like talking about myself very much, but anyway, that's kind of it. Yeah, continue doing your Taka Wheel of Reflection if you find it meaningful, because that will give you an idea about where to look at, and we'll be looking a little bit deeper on the next video as well. So any questions, you can email me, and I'll address those at some point. Otherwise, have a blessed weekend, and I will see you next week.